Greetings everyone. I hope your days have thus far been incident-free, smooth sailing. My name is Quimby Bunce and I am joining today representing RIB South Africa. We are a technology company staffed by construction professionals who have been delivering solutions for the construction industry in South Africa and abroad for more than 40 years now. If you don't recognize the name RIB, you may remember us by our pre-acquisition name CCS, or you may recognize our flagship product names Candy and BuildSmart. Jumping right in, today we are going to explore a topic that lies at the intersection of uncertainty, opportunity and strategy, and that is risk. With all decision making, risk is an ever-present companion, whether we're launching a new venture, investing in a project, or navigating the complexities of the rapidly changing market. Every action we take carries with it this uncertain degree of uncertainty. But we also know that risk is not only a shadow to be feared, it's often also a road marker for opportunity. Indeed, the pursuit of success often requires us to venture into the unknown, to embrace uncertainty, and to make decisions in the face of incomplete information. The pursuit of reward is inevitably a trade-off. For every opportunity we pursue, there are risks to be managed, risks that can jeopardize our goals, disrupt our plans, and undermine our efforts. Balancing the potential rewards against the inherent risks is this delicate art, requiring us to weigh the potential benefits against the potential pitfalls and to make hopefully informed decisions accordingly. The discipline of risk management has evolved over centuries, shaped by the experiences of explorers and merchants and entrepreneurs who've faced uncertainty on the high seas, in the marketplace, and on the battlefield. Risk management has become an indispensable tool for decision makers seeking to navigate any number of complexities. So let us embark on this journey as we explore the principles and practices of risk management and chart a course towards a future defined not by fear but by resilience, adaptability, and informed decision making.
Sir, we found a way to eliminate risk entirely from our projects. Lead crystal. Custom engineered. Name a project we're bidding.
McChesney Office Complex.
In February, we'll have a crane accident that shuts us down for 8 days.
Coopersmith.
We've got cost overruns in March from a global spike in steel prices. In April, credit markets freeze up. We'll have 2 subcontractors going under.
Was this expensive?
A little.
We're gonna be rich. Did we have insurance on that?
Oh, look, it came with a stand.
BuildSmart and Candy, working in tandem, are designed to help you surface information in real time in order to identify risks early so that you can take appropriate action, representing to your business in a way an indestructible crystal ball. Candy Estimating integrates with BuildSmart Procurement to provide precise quantity and rate information to achieve accurate purchasing, the first step in effective cost control. BuildSmart captures actual costs relative to the estimated figures, improving the accuracy of future estimates and helping you to secure more profitable work. And we organize cost information simultaneously by activity and by cost type. This allows one-to-one comparison of cost information across estimating project management and accounting. As a cloud-based solution for construction management, BuildSmart lets your team enter information where it is produced. It is surfacing costs where they happen in real time directly against the budgets or the allowable for the project, which allow you to identify challenges early and simulate remediation strategies in order to predict the impact to your at completion financials. So a quick flight plan for today's talk. First, a high-level overview of the discipline of risk management, just to give us all a common language to reference. Then we delve into construction risk, specifically identifying the key risk categories before drilling one more level down on what I would call the usual suspects. Having outlined the challenges, we will then cover your role as a construction professional in dealing with risk in the construction project. And since I was recording this in the month of Halloween, I will share with you a construction horror story that showcases how consequential these activities we will cover can be. And of course, it wouldn't be an RIB presentation if I didn't close out by outlining very briefly, I promise, the role of technology in helping you cope with the rigors and the complexity of risk management in construction. So risk management as a discipline involves a systematic approach to identifying, assessing, prioritizing, and then mitigating risks to achieve your organization's objectives. The key components of risk management include risk culture and governance. So establishing a risk-aware culture and effective governance structures are critical for embedding risk management into the organizational mindset and ensuring accountability for managing risks effectively. Risk identification involves identifying potential risks that could affect the organization's objectives, projects, or operations. Risks can be categorized into various types. The typical categorizations include financial, operational, strategic, compliance, and reputational risk. Once the risks are identified, they are assessed to determine their likelihood of occurrence and the potential impact on the organization should they occur. Risk assessment typically involves qualitative and quantitative analysis to prioritize risks based on their severity and their significance. Prioritizing risks involves ranking them based on their potential impact and likelihood, as well as considering other factors such as time constraints, resources, and strategic priorities. High priority risks are addressed with greater urgency and resources. Risk mitigation strategies are implemented to reduce the likelihood or impact of identified risks. So these strategies can include things like risk avoidance. Risk avoidance is simply circumventing a risk if it is possible. Risk transfer, that's a strategy like insurance against a risk. Risk reduction through implementing controls, or risk acceptance, and that is just acknowledging and monitoring the risk without taking further action. Marked in red on the slide, you'll see risk monitoring and control. Risk management is an ongoing process that requires continuous monitoring and review of identified risks. I mark these in red because these are the things typically not done well in construction. So it involves tracking the changes in the risk landscape, monitoring the effectiveness of mitigation measures, and adjusting your strategy as needed to address emerging risks or changing circumstances. Communication and reporting. So of course, effective communication of risk and risk management activities is essential for stakeholders to make informed decisions. Regular reporting on risk status, mitigation efforts, and emerging threats ensures the kind of transparency and accountability you need within your organization. Most importantly, risk management needs to be integrated with decision making. If it's not integrated with your decision-making processes at all levels, you're not ensuring that risk considerations are taken into account when planning strategies, allocating resources, and pursuing opportunity. So construction projects are complex endeavors. They involve numerous stakeholders, intricate processes, and substantial financial investments. While these projects offer all the good stuff, those being opportunities for innovation, growth, and development, they also entail inherent risks that can impact timelines, budgets, and overall project success. Understanding and effectively managing these risks are critical for stakeholders to mitigate potential losses and ensure project objectives are achieved. Now, I love this quote. It is lifted from court filings in a case between a general contractor and their client. It is in defense of the contractor, and it is a thing of beauty. Except in the middle of a battlefield, nowhere must men coordinate the movement of other men and all materials in the midst of such chaos and with such limited certainty of present facts and future occurrences as in a huge construction project. Even the most painstaking planning frequently turns out to be mere conjecture, and accommodation to changes must necessarily be of the rough, quick, and ad hoc sort, analogous to the ever-changing commands on the battlefield. So what we must acknowledge is the unpredictable nature of our industry. For us, preparation is insufficient. We must be able to react to changing circumstances effectively and early. This means near real-time access to data is pivotal, but also almost, when it comes to the construction industry, entirely lacking. So the key types of risk management, they normally include financial risk, scheduling risk, operational risk, contractual risk, and environmental and regulatory risk. Financial risk encompasses factors that could lead to cost overruns, budgetary constraints, or insufficient funding throughout your project. And so this includes inaccurate cost estimates, volatile material prices, currency fluctuations, or delays in payment. Schedule risk pertains to the potential for delays or disruptions that could impact the project timeline. Factors contributing to schedule risk include poor project planning, unforeseen site conditions, adverse weather conditions, or delays in the delivery of materials and equipment. Operational risk involves issues that could affect the efficiency and functionality of the completed project once it's been commissioned. You may have, while at university, heard the famous story of the project failure of the Denver airport. Their decisions made related to the construction, assembly, and placement of the baggage conveyor resulted in long-term impact to the airport's efficiency and flight management, even contributing significantly to flight delays. Here, the causes may include design flaws, construction defects, inadequate quality control, or insufficient maintenance planning. Contractual risk arises from contractual agreements being between project stakeholders and may result from breaches of contract, disputes over scope or specifications, or failure to meet contractual obligations. Environmental and regulatory risk encompasses compliance issues, environmental impacts, and legal requirements that could affect the project. This may include zoning regulations, permitting delays, environmental assessments, or changes in legislation. So in the interest of time and priority, I'll break down a little further only 2 of the 5 categories I've mentioned. Those are going to be financial and scheduling risk, because these are the primary culprits when we're talking about construction. So let's start with financial risk. Accurately estimating the cost of a construction project is challenging. I'm sure I'm speaking to the choir, but indulge me. This is due to factors such as fluctuating material prices, labor costs, regulatory requirements, and unforeseen site conditions. Inaccurate cost estimates can lead to budget overruns and financial strain on project stakeholders. Butchering the estimate is oftentimes the root cause of most of what you see itemized on this slide. Budget constraints occur when project costs exceed the allocated budget. This may result from inadequate cost estimation, scope changes, delays, or unexpected expenses. Budget overruns can of course strain project finances and affect cash flow, eroding profitability. Securing adequate finance for construction projects is essential to fund capital expenditures, working capital needs, and other project costs. Financing risks arise from challenges in accessing credit, changes in the interest rates, lender requirements, or delays in project funding. Managing cash flow effectively is critical for sustaining construction activities, meeting financial obligations, and avoiding liquidity problems. Cash flow risks may arise from delays in project payments, disputes over invoicing, payment defaults, or even revenue streams. Construction projects are vulnerable to market and economic fluctuations, including changes in demand, supply chain disruptions, inflation, currency exchange rates, and economic recessions. These factors can impact project revenues, costs, and profitability. Sitting downstream of these other risks are contractual disputes, legal liabilities. Regulatory non-compliance can pose financial risks for construction projects. Breaches of contract, claims for damages, litigation costs, and regulatory fines can result in financial losses and damage to reputation. Insurance plays a critical role in mitigating these risks by providing coverage for property damage, liability claims, worker injuries, and other potential losses. Effective risk transfer mechanisms such as indemnification clauses and insurance policies help allocate risks among project stakeholders. Construction projects involving international transactions are exposed to foreign exchange risk arising from fluctuations in currency exchange rates. Currency volatility can affect project costs, revenues, financing arrangements, and profitability, particularly for projects with long durations. Effective management of financial risks in construction requires robust risk identification, assessment, mitigation, and monitoring strategies. Stakeholders should employ financial modeling, scenario analysis, risk hedging techniques, and contingency planning to address potential risks and enhance project resilience. Okay, let's go one level down on scheduling risk. Inadequate project planning and coordination can contribute to scheduling risks by failing to account for critical tasks, dependencies, resource constraints, and other external factors. Poorly defined project scopes, ambiguous schedules, and unrealistic timelines can increase the likelihood of delays and disruptions. Construction projects are susceptible to unforeseen site conditions such as soil instability, environmental hazards, archaeological discoveries, or underground utilities. These conditions may require design modifications, additional permitting, or remediation efforts, resulting in delays and added costs. Our dependency on external suppliers, vendors, and subcontractors exposes construction projects to supply chain disruptions such as material shortages, production delays, transport issues, or quality deficiencies. Delays in the delivery of materials, equipment, or components can impede construction progress and extend project timelines. Adverse weather conditions, natural disasters, and environmental constraints pose significant scheduling risks to construction projects. Heavy rain, extreme temperatures, hurricanes, floods, or seismic events can halt construction activities, damage infrastructure, and cause delays. Our projects rely on skilled labor and workforce availability to execute tasks according to the project schedule. Labor shortages, workforce turnover, labor disputes, or low productivity levels can disrupt construction progress, prolong project durations, and therefore increase costs. Compliance with regulatory requirements, delays in obtaining permits, approvals, or regulatory clearances due to bureaucratic processes, environmental reviews, or public consultations can impede project progress. Design changes and rework, changes in project scope, design revisions, or unforeseen discrepancies can necessitate rework, often 30% of the work done on construction sites, modifications, or additional approvals impacting project schedules. Poorly coordinated design changes, conflicting specifications, or late-stage modifications can lead to schedule disruptions and cost overruns. Again, downstream of these other calamities awaits contractual disputes, claims or conflicts among project stakeholders that can affect project schedules and delay construction activities. Disagreements over scope changes, payment disputes, variations in contract terms, or disagreement on project milestones always have the potential to escalate into legal disputes and impede project progress. To mitigate scheduling risks in construction, stakeholders should employ proactive scheduling techniques, risk identification processes, contingency planning, and effective communication among project teams. Utilizing project management tools, scheduling software, critical path analysis, and buffer management can enhance schedule resilience and facilitate timely project delivery. So what is your role as a construction professional in risk management? So perhaps a quick summary of your role would go something like this. You need to proactively identify and evaluate risks that could affect costs, contracts, or timelines. You need to develop a mitigation plan by building contingencies into your budgets and your contracts. You need to monitor costs and project progress to mitigate risks as they arise, as soon after the first domino falls as possible. You need to manage changes and variations to control their financial impact, and most importantly, you should equip yourself to resolve disputes related to financial or contractual issues. By proactively managing risks, you help ensure that the project stays on track, financially and contractually preventing disruptions and safeguarding the client's interests. Let's drill down just one more level. So fair to say, quantity surveyors, commercial managers, project managers, and the like play a crucial role in construction risk management. Your involvement helps ensure that the project stays within its budget, you minimize unforeseen costs, and you address risks that could affect project timelines or quality. So what are the risks that you are typically looking to identify? Cost overruns, unforeseen costs related to materials, labor, or project changes. Design changes, alterations in the project design that could impact budget and schedule. Contractual disputes, issues arising from unclear contract terms or disagreements between contractors and their clients. Delays, project delays caused by site conditions, weather, supply chain disruptions, or other external factors. And then health and safety risks, compliance risks that may lead to any additional costs or delays. Risk assessment and evaluation. So after identifying potential risks, you assess their likelihood and the impact on the project. So what this involves, estimating the cost implications of each risk, including possible cost overruns, delays, or changes to the project scope, and then classifying risks based on their severity and the likelihood of occurrence, allowing the project team to focus on the most critical risks. Those, of course, being the most severe with the greatest likelihood of occurring. Cost planning and budget allocation for risks. This might include contingency planning, setting aside funds within the budget to cover unexpected expenses that may arise due to risk occurrences. Value management, ensuring that the project delivers the best possible value by analyzing alternative construction methods or materials to reduce costs and manage risks. Procurement and contractual risk. Mitigate risks through careful procurement and contract management. Clear contract documentation, ensuring that contracts are well defined with terms that protect the contracted parties from potential risks such as delay, design change, or non-performance. Risk transfer. So through contract terms, you can transfer certain risks to insurance, to subcontractors, to third parties, thereby reducing exposure. Contractual clauses that provide for penalties in case contracted parties fail to meet deadlines or quality requirements. Cost monitoring and risk control. So during construction, project progress is monitored to control risk by regular cost reports, preparing financial reports that track actual costs against the budgeted amounts, identifying any cost variances early on, managing variations, handling change orders or variations in the project scope by assessing their cost and time impacts and advising on how to minimize disruption. Valuations and payments, certifying the value of work completed and ensuring that payments to contractors reflects progress, which prevents disputes and maintains positive cash flow. Change management. Changes to the project scope or unforeseen circumstances can introduce new risks. Evaluate the financial impact, assess the cost and time implications of design changes and variations, advise on mitigation, suggest strategies to mitigate the financial impact of the changes. This would include options like alternative approaches or materials. Dispute avoidance and resolution. Manage and avoid disputes that can arise from financial or contractual disagreements by ensuring transparency. Provide clear and accurate cost records and progress reports to avoid misunderstandings. Mediating contractual issues. Engage in early mediation to resolve issues related to payment, variations or delays before they escalate. Post-project risk review. After project completion, perform a review of the project's financial and contractual performance. To do this, you need to prepare final accounts, ensuring that all costs are reconciled and the project's financial risks have been properly managed. Learn from risk occurrences. Analyze any risk that materialized during the project and how they were managed, providing you with lessons for future projects. So there you go, not very much to do at all. I do hope you occasionally get to kiss your kids goodnight. Before I go on to tell you how technology can support you in making these tasks easier, I wanted, in the spirit of Halloween, which is when I'm recording this, to share with you a construction horror story, a cautionary tale of what can happen when we get it wrong. I think many of you will have some familiarity with this tale. Despite having been a private project in Ghana, it is inextricably linked to the history of the South African construction industry. I present to you the Capone Independent Power Plant. So on an otherwise normal Tuesday morning in March 2019, after 45 years of trading on Johannesburg Stock Exchange, Group 5 stock was suspended after the company filed for bankruptcy protection, making it at the time the 5th local builder to enter business rescue in less than a year. From a peak market value of 8.2 billion in 2007, Group 5 was worth less than 100 million rand when the shares stopped trading. 8,000 jobs ceased to exist. What was to blame? A depressed South African economy, high levels of national debt and low infrastructure spending at the time. These reasons were cited in the press, and almost certainly this did play a role in exacerbating the outcome. However, Group 5 themselves, in minutes of the company's board meeting that was held on the Monday prior, largely blamed the underpricing of construction projects for the company's downfall. The company revealed that the group experienced negative cash flows from operating activities of 880 million for 2018. Market conditions in the construction industry had worsened and certain of the company's projects were underpriced, which resulted in those projects being loss-making. Group 5, once one of South Africa's leading construction firms, collapsed due to a combination of poor strategic decisions, mismanagement and external market factors, but the final big mistake that led to its demise was its mismanagement of large-scale projects, particularly the Capone Power Plant project in Ghana. The project was developed by SenPower Generation, Africa Finances, Sumitomo, SenPower Holdings, African Infrastructure Investment Managers, and the Nederlandse Financiering Maatschappij voor Ontwikkelingslanden. Currently, those all still own a stake, those being 32%, 28%, 21%, 15%, and 4% respectively. So there were plenty of investors to keep happy. It is a gas turbine power plant that is used for baseload in Ghana, and the power plant runs on dual fuel. The primary fuel being used to power the plant is natural gas, and in case of a shortage of natural gas, the plant can also run on light crude oil, so diesel. The power plant is in operation, having been commissioned in June 2019, but it has a story to tell. The Capone Independent Power Plant project was initially estimated at $900 million and slated for completion in 2017, but faced several issues that led to significant delays and financial challenges. The project in the end topped $1.1 billion when it completed 2 years over schedule. There were technical and logistical issues during construction not accounted for in the project allowable. This resulted in delays in procuring and installing key equipment, which caused significant setbacks. SenPower Generation Company, the developer of the project's subsequent dispute with Group 5 on account of these challenges in delivering on time, led to legal battles and thus further delays in project completion. So it was a predictable domino effect, leading to significant time and ultimately cost overruns. Ultimately, these disputes over cost overruns and delays resulted in the termination of Group 5's contract in 2018, but this was not before severely damaging the project's investor confidence and reputationally damaging Group 5. And as we know, Group 5 later faced liquidation due to its inability to cover the financial strain caused by the penalties they incurred on the project. So now that we have all tut-tutted and shaken our heads at the misfortunes of others, I would hasten to remind you that they also got away with it for many, many times before their methods caught up with them. And the question you need to ask yourself is, are your methods planning a day of reckoning with you? Technology plays a crucial role in combating financial and scheduling risk in construction by providing tools and solutions to enhance decision making, by streamlining processes and improving project visibility. The key ingredient is real-time information, allowing you to identify emerging risks early and calculate the impact they will have on your project at final account. Explore mitigation scenarios and simulate different remediation strategies and their impact on the at-completion financial position so that you can make decisions that are better informed. As RIB South Africa, we have for more than 40 years been supporting construction professionals in accomplishing these objectives. I'm going to hand you over now to my colleague Warren Holman, who will engage you in a story about his friend Morph, and hopefully at the same time give you some insight into how you manage common construction risks related to material, labor, plant and equipment, and subcontractors using our solution. Warren, the floor is yours.
And good day and welcome to the following presentation from last year, construction risks and rising costs. So, as you'll remember, last year we delved a bit deeper into my good friend Morph, and a bit of history of Morph. Loved to party, always partied hard, was a bit of a liar, a wheeler and dealer, so to say, and wanted to climb the corporate ladder. Unfortunately, Morph found a girlfriend whose father was in construction, and if you recall last year, Morph father-in-law setting up in a business as a subcontractor just so he could get off his couch, because the challenge is Morph was on the couch and not doing much, just partying. And we found out and realized that Morph was busy working in segregated silos within his business. Each division was doing their own thing. So from project planning to estimation, deliveries on site, workers or laborers were all being worked in segregated silos. And he was reporting after the fact. And what was happening to poor Morph in his first couple of contracts was he was drowning. And at any point he did not know if he was making profit. So business was not great. He was not making money, and he was still on his father-in-law's couch. Well, nothing's changed, except his future father-in-law is not too happy because one thing has changed. Morfini is going to become a father. Unfortunately, still on the couch of his father-in-law. But he still lived the high life. So he was spending more than he was earning, hence why he was not getting off the couch. So he approached us and said, please, can you help us, give us a breakdown of why he's not making money. So we had a look at the challenges and risks facing modern construction companies today. And we broke them up into a couple of parts. Materials, so over-ordering of materials. Labor, we had a look at labor, plant and equipment. And then not so bad, but subcontractors as well. So Morph tenders on a job. It is Radio Hout or Houtstock FM, and he tenders on the job. But the job is in Twee Buffels met een skoot doodgeskiet Fontein. No one really even knows where that is. And we think that Morph only won this tender because he was about the only one who tendered on it, because he didn't know much about the area. Realizing that from his head office in Pretoria or Johannesburg, it's a 2-hour, 37-minute delivery. And when he went to have a look at the new site that he was going to build, he found no material suppliers, no hardware stores, no plant and equipment. And what he had to do was literally transport everything out to Twee Buffels met een skoot mors dood geskiet Fontein. And his website claims the following. He has completed over 30 projects, all projects within a radius of 200 kilometers. He employs 250 workers now. However, what the public is not told, each project trial balance looks like this. And the challenges are because he's working in segregated silos. So hence he's not making money, and hence why he's still on his future father-in-law's couch. So we think we're managing the project correctly as a team. However, what is happening is at a measure of work, at what point do we actually understand whether we're making or losing money? I chat to a lot of people in the construction industry. I've been in the industry for 30 years. And they will tell me that they have completed a site. But once the site is complete, only after final account do they know if they've made money or not. Everyone on site wants a barbecue for the non-South African listeners or watchers, or for the South Africans a brown site, because site looks great. And we've completed the project. However, the man on top will only know in 6 weeks' time, once he's done the final account, whether he has made money or not. In other words, whether he's going to be drinking Johnny Walker Blue or water after that. Because generally we only know once final account is done. So our good friend Morph decides to do an analysis on the historical projects, and what we're going to investigate is material supplies, the labor component of these projects, plant and equipment, and not so much but subcontractor as well. So challenges around material supply is exactly what we see here. Once a project is complete, we do analysis on the site and we've been over ordering material because the challenge on site is we need the site to go on. And if we need bricks, we order bricks. If we do not have any control to at what are we ordering against, we will just continuously over order, and at completion of the project we will have extra stock eaten into our property. Theft, big issue. If we're not tracking our stores correctly, small tools, drills, I've heard of plant and equipment being stolen. If we're not tracking and monitoring the movement of that correctly and people are stealing it, it is eating into our profits. And then these are the risks associated with material supply within the construction sphere. Supply chain disruptions, supply reliability, transportation and logistic challenges, and price volatility. So the risk associated with the material supply within the construction sphere. Procuring materials for construction involves various risks that can impact project timelines and budgets. Supply chain disruptions, supply reliability, transport and logistic challenges, as we see with Morph. He has to deliver to 2 buffels met 1 skoot to Moorstoot Geskietfontein. And then price volatility. So supply chain disruptions is disruptions in the supply chain due to material lead times and manufacturing challenges. This can lead to delay in material deliveries. These disruptions can affect the availability of essential materials, causing project delays and cost overruns. If we are not planning correctly and we are not speaking to our suppliers on long lead times and when deliveries need to be delivered, we cannot pay the roofers if we don't have the blocks on site. So what I mean by that is, if we are not with a supplier, giving them a histogram of when and where we're going to require material and at what point we're going to require that material, we are not planning properly, and that can now lead to delays in the project because, as I said, we cannot pay the roofers if we haven't done the brickwork. Price volatility in South Africa, not such a huge issue. I come out of the steel industry many moons ago. I used to be involved in roof sheeting. Dealt with many of my people most probably listening to this. And January and July, I could tell you that there would be a steel price increase. And roughly how much? In the late 90s, early 2000s, when China started taking all the steel out of the international market, a bunch of us went to then ISCOR, which is now Mittal, and said to them they need to keep some steel available for the local markets or raw material. And they said, that's great, they'll do that, provided we pay the international price parity. The market agreed to that, and the volatility was monthly. So from being able to predict an increase in January to July, it was changing every month. Basic economics, supply and demand. The demand was much higher than the world could produce, so the prices skyrocketed. And in fact, I think in 1 year, if I recall correctly, steel raw material went up by about 90%. How do we quote if we cannot predict the price volatility? So price volatility poses a challenge for project budgeting, cost estimation and risk management. We must closely monitor market trends. We need to constantly track price movements and implement strategies to mitigate the impact of price volatility on project costs. So we could always potentially have a histogram again of when we require materials and potentially tie down our supplier either at a fixed cost or at minimum incremental disruptions of that price during the process of the project, because on his side he knows what's coming and he can plan around it. Whereas if we just place in orders wherever we can, there is no proper planning. When we procure material, what do we compare the cost of material to? So factors affecting morph to material risks: buying at a higher price than originally allowed in tender, over procuring material, requirements versus our estimate, variation orders, changes of scope of work. We all love that engineer who runs on site, screams and shouts at everyone to change things. We generally make a note in a site diary, but are we pricing for that? If we don't have proper controls within the project, how do we know that there's a variance? And not planning properly, materials not delivered on time, slowing down production. So what I'm saying is exactly this. In this instance, if we have proper project planning in our Candy planning, we can do a project plan, red obviously being our critical path, green being our float connected to the critical path. But at the bottom here, you're going to see histograms, and this we can have in a diagram format like this, or we could actually have it with dates opposed to it and download it onto our laptop. But the beauty of this is we can now go to our supplier, in this instance it's 30 MPa concrete, and we can tell him at what point we're roughly expecting our usage, and he needs to plan properly and effectively so he's ready to deliver at that point in time. Obviously don't just deliver, phone us first, because we know site progress changes all the time, but at least he knows what he needs to plan for. And we can do this with bricks, we can do this with roofing, we can do this with concrete for foundations. So we can plan properly to allow our suppliers time to deliver and for them to plan properly. And also on top of it, we can say, well, Guy, we're going to buy 10,000 cubes of concrete from you over a period of 2 years. Give us your best price and try hold that price firm for us. So just proper planning prevents poor performance. The benefits of this exactly: improved efficiency. We allow our suppliers to better prepare and plan deliveries according to our schedules. We're enhancing cost savings. We now have the ability to negotiate the better buying prices over the period of the contract with our suppliers. And we're reducing waste, because effective planning ensures that materials are delivered in the right quantities and at the right time, minimizing the risk of over-ordering or underutilization. So we reduce the risk of project delays and disruptions caused by material shortages or late deliveries, therefore mitigating our risk and keeping the project to carry on. What do we compare when we are buying material? Without proper resource lists, we generally get quotes from a region and the lowest price supplier gets the order. Is this correct? Well, no. All we have done is got a comparative price within the region and the lowest price wins. We need to always compare the purchase price with what we originally allowed in our tender, quantity and rate. And should we buy outside of this allowable, we want to be warned before we process the order, because currently what happens is, if we don't have proper resource lists monitoring and tracking quantity and rate, we generally just buy, get 3 or 5 quotes within the region, and lowest price wins, depending on reliability of supplier. Take that all into consideration, but that's how we're generally doing it. what we need to do is always compare what our estimating department allowed in our estimate. So if you have a look at our software in BuildSmart, the minute we raise a requisition, what BuildSmart's going to continuously do is they're going to continuously compare against what our estimate allowed. So we're going to have original quantities that we allowed for. We're going to have original rates that we allowed for. We're going to have a look at all the purchase history of this material in this instance. So right now we have an unapproved order. So instead of us ordering more material, maybe we should just pick up a phone and find out who the approver is, and maybe phone him up and say to him, hey buddy, please just approve the order so our supplier can get the purchase order and release. We have a committed cost here. And what is a committed cost? A committed cost is simply an order that's placed but hasn't been delivered yet. In this instance, maybe we just need to pick up the phone and phone our supplier and ask him to deliver the materials that's on order. Over here in this block, we can now see a wealth of information. What our original budget was from Candy, what our current buy rate is from BuildSmart, what is our allowable budget, do we have material left that we can order, and then very importantly on top here, it's telling us that we are buying over the original allowed rate. Sure, diesel has gone up, material pricing has gone up, but at least we know about it before we effect the purchase order. Very important. And we can now later on, which I'll show you, we can actually see what the financial implication of this is at the completion of our project. So this allows us to analyze all costs before we make a purchase decision. So we're always comparing buying prices to original tendered price. This is done for material, it's done for labor, for plant and equipment, and for subcontractors. So what I'm saying is we are always comparing up front before we make the decision, because I always get asked in these seminars, how do I make more profit? And it's simple, you need to mitigate risk. How do you mitigate risk? Well, the mitigation of risk means you need to make a decision based on the information that you have at your fingertips at that point in time. So, good information, good decision, poor information, bad decision. The beauty of our two softwares integrated, it gives us real-time live data at a touch of a button, meaning that we have accurate, true information at our fingertips. By having that, it means we can then make an informed decision. By making an informed decision, we're mitigating risk. And by mitigating risk, we have to be more profitable. So by having the two systems integrated, this allows us as a team to evaluate each requisition, and again, for material, labor, plant and equipment before we make an informed decision. Right, labor analysis. The three parts that cost money in any project is material, labor, plant and equipment. That is where we lose, generally. The challenges around labor analysis is productivity. We all know that at some point in time, our guys get paid on a pay weekend, and when they get back to work, sometimes they are not as productive as they were before the weekend, because we all know the culture in South Africa once a pay weekend happens. Ghost workers, if we're not tracking and monitoring our labor force, our unskilled, skilled, semi-skilled laborers, other people clocking for them, if we don't have a proper time and attendance in place tracking and monitoring our clocking, we could definitely lose money. So yes, unproductivity or non-productivity, ghost workers is two of the biggest issues that happens on a construction site. So labor risks affecting projects. Many aspects of labor affect our construction processes and can lead to cost overruns, ghost workers, which is financial fraud, reduced productivity, and also labor shortages. In South Africa, not such a big issue, but I do a lot of work in Mauritius, and every time one of my clients there lands a new project, the first thing they do is they fly over to India to find unskilled labor. So your bricklayers, your guys who are general workers on site, they're flying over, plasterers, to find these guys. And interestingly enough, the first person they employ is the cook out of the region. At least they know that the guys will be well fed and happy. But it is a challenge in Mauritius. So ghost workers, also known as phantom workers, generally happens when people do not get to site, their friends clock for them. And we've got a production factor that we expect our workers to achieve. And if they're not getting to site yet, we're paying them. This becomes a financial fraud on the project. And again, I reiterate, if we don't have a proper time and attendance way of monitoring the workers that are getting there at what time and what time they lead in for us to effectively pay them, we are dead and buried, because it happens. We have the ability on our cell phone to, as a foreman, to quickly capture my labor hours. Or if we're more advanced and we have a proper time and attendance, we have the ability to then bring that into BuildSmart. And the beauty of that, the minute we bring it into BuildSmart, we have accrued the labor cost to that project, to that activity. This means we might not have run a pay run yet, but we already know about our labor cost down to that project, down to that activity on that project. So, for example, we could see we are losing on labor down to the foundations of project A, or we're losing on labor down to earth or clearing of site on project B. So we can track and monitor, and then we can again look into the future with the systems integrated and say, well, if this is the point that we're losing now, at completion of the project, the holistic view, what does that mean for us at completion? Okay. So we have said it is financial fraud. And it reduces our productivity because, again, I reiterate, if we are clocking for other people or capturing that they're there and they're not there, we expect a production factor out of them a day, and if they're not there, we're not getting that production factor. And in fact, I've done a bit of an example on productivity. So we allow certain production factors within our budget for our laborers to achieve daily. If we do not achieve these targets, we are allowing the project to get into serious trouble regarding sticking to our plan. Let us have a look at an example. So many years ago, when I was a project manager on site, and that was 25 years ago, the expected rate out of a bricklayer was to lay 1,000 bricks per day. I know it's come way down, but let's look at an example. We want to lay 200,000 bricks on a project, and we are using 10 laborers. Hence, we should be producing 10,000 bricks per day, and this should take us 20 days. Right. However, our guys are producing at 700 bricks a day, which in South African schooling is 70%, which is double the pass rate. So we actually doing pretty well. However, it means we effectively are laying 7,000 bricks a day. This increases our overrun on that section, be it to walling, be it to foundation, a 42.8% overrun, increasing our effectively planned 20 days to 28, nearly 29 days. So very important in our payroll is the minute we capture labor hours, we can track and monitor what our cost is per activity per project. If we've integrated Candy and BuildSmart, we will in Candy say this is what our expected production factor per day is. And the minute we measure work, Candy is going to produce us an allowable budget, including that efficiency, and BuildSmart's going to, at the same point in time, compare the actual labor cost to that project, to that activity, to see if we are overrunning or if we're on target. Very, very important, because everyone generally thinks material is where we lose money. It's all those little hidden costs, like in production, if we're not monitoring or tracking our labor. And by us directly capturing to contract an activity, and be that through a TNA, which we can just bring in, or be it via our foreman capturing it on his mobile, or by us capturing directly the labor hours into BuildSmart, we, at any point in time, we can have an accrued cost for that project, even though we have not run a pay run. Because historically, in any generic ERP solution, only once we handle the payroll can we now allocate the cost. And generally, that's a workforce cost. It is not down to the granularity that you need in the construction industry to analyze it correctly and to help us make informed decisions as we move forward within the project. Right. And as I said, the minute we capture labor costs, it becomes an accrued cost to this project down to the activity. Challenges facing our plant yard. Well, yeah, very high cost, and if we're not managing our plant and equipment effectively, if we're not monitoring our production hours, breakdown hours, rain time, standing time, we are dead and buried. Because again, we allow certain productions at an hourly cost on plant and equipment. And again, if we're not achieving those productions, it's costing us money. And at what point do we know? Only once the hours are agreed, after the fact or historically, and then we try analyze it after the fact. By us simply capturing service meter readings, we have all the information live. Okay, so cost management. Acquiring, maintaining, and operating plant and equipment is very expensive. We all know that. From the initial purchase or rental costs, the maintenance. I mean, I know for a fact a few years ago, Caterpillar injectors were 18,000 Rand a pop and you needed 6. So replacement of expensive needs to carefully manage and ensure they align within the project budget. Again, we always need to compare our plant and equipment costs and productions versus what we originally allowed in our tender. Utilization optimization. We need to manage the utilization and optimize that plant and equipment to become more cost effective. However, achieving optimal utilization can be challenging. Due to fluctuations in project timelines, unexpected delays, rain delays, breakdown hours, and variations to the workload. Equipment downtime. If we're not managing our downtime due to breakages or delays, rain days, strikes on sites in South Africa, if we're not effectively managing the downtime of that equipment, it's costing us money. whether that's piece of equipment, internal or externally hired in, is not working, we are still being charged an hourly or daily rate. So we need to manage and track the production and the efficiency of that product very closely to what we originally allowed in our project. And in BuildSmart, by simply capturing the service meter readings, which we have to do daily anyway, and we capture it directly into BuildSmart, we get a wealth of information. So the first thing we can do is we can flag service intervals. So as we capture the service meter reading, it will tell us that we are getting close to a 250 or 500 hours service, or 750. It will tell us what we require. So 250 could just be a lubrication service, maybe a couple of oil filter changes, and we can track and monitor that. And it now will warn us that within the next couple of days or 40 hours, we have these machines coming in for 250 hours. 500 hours could be a different service, and we can tell BuildSmart what it is. And just by us capturing our service meter readings, we can now have a proper trial balance or profit and loss statement on our material. So out of that, we can now have a look at our production hours, we can look at our breakdown hours, and this is simply by capturing our service meter readings. We can have our utilized hours, our standing hours, and the beauty of it is we can now have a P&L per item, because each plant becomes an asset on its own, and by capturing the service meter readings, we can now analyze our profit and loss per item. And if we see that one item is costing us a bit more, maybe it's time to get rid of it and then do the whole process. In it, we handle the bank finance, how are we depreciating, is it straight line, is it straight line with hours, and we track and monitor all that, including our insurance costs. Everything around that plant and equipment we track and monitor. But the most important issue that I want to get across to you as the listeners is, by capturing the service meter readings, we can track the productivity and the hourly costs, and we're always going to compare that back to what we originally allowed in our budgets. And then it also gives us a wealth of information. I mean, I think it's only in South Africa that we can get 340 litres into a 300 litre tank of diesel. It normally happens on a Thursday or Friday before a long weekend, when one of our foremen needs to get to Durban to visit his girlfriend. So we can track and monitor everything around that plant and equipment. So after the contract is complete, Morph is left with the following situation by listening to RIB software. He's completed a project at a profit. He's moving off the couch, and he can now finally get married and be a family of 3 in his own little townhouse, making his father-in-law extremely, extremely happy. So why do we typically do this? Is so that we can have an actual versus a cost live. So what is our actual cost versus our budget? And at a measure of work, this is a typical cost report. Candy is going to produce an allowable budget. BuildSmart's going to produce an actual contract cost real-time live, and it's going to give us a variance at completion. Now, in any generic ERP solution, at a measure of work, we'll have our allowable or our budget at that point in time. At what point do we get our actual contract cost? Well, only once a financial process has taken place. So only once we have captured an invoice for material, got the delivery note back from site, and if we run 30-day accounts, this is generally delayed by 60 days because it's from statement. When we get the statement, we then capture it into our ERP solution, and then we allocate the cost after the fact. Same with labor. Only once we run a pay run Can we allocate the cost after the fact? Plant and equipment. Internally, once our plant division and we have agreed from site and an interbranch transactions taken place, can we allocate the cost after the fact? Subcontractors. Only once we've measured subcontractors and paid them, the financial process has taken place, then we can allocate the cost after the fact. We're saying that is wrong for construction because as we measure subcontractor work, it accrues to the project down to the activity on that project. What you'll see, it's at the granularity that you require. Once you've received materials on site, does it accrue the cost to that project down to that activity? Very important, because we're not waiting for an invoice or a statement from our supplier. We know about the cost already. The minute we capture service meter readings, then we know about the cost. We're not waiting for an interbranch transaction or a financial transaction to take place before we can allocate after the fact. And as I said, this is generally 4 to 6 weeks after it has happened. So what does this mean to us? It means at a measure of work, like we saw in the previous slide, we are losing money. There are only two methods or two things we can control on site. That's production factor or better key commodity buying. There's nothing else we can control on site. So what I mean by this, we cannot go back to our client and say we need more money. We've made a mistake. So what we need to do is literally say, how can we affect the outcome of the project to our gain on the project? So in this instance, here's our worksheets in Candy. This is the measurement or yardstick in the sand. This is what we always want to measure again. We never ever want to change this. The worksheet on the right is a mirror image of the worksheet on the left, and this is what we call the what if scenario. So in this instance, we've gone and we have negotiated better key commodity buying, and we have now plugged it in the new worksheet to get a result. So now what we'll effectively see is by making that one decision, we have now changed the to date, where we are losing, I think it was 1603, we have now clawed it back to a gain of 32 Rand. And this is why we do it, is because we want to break down all the silos within the construction processes so that everyone is on the same repository of information for us to gather really, really good information within our construction project, allowing us to make better informed decisions so that we can mitigate risk and be more profitable. So what I mean by that is taking estimating, because they work in their own silo. Our project planning department works in our own silo. Then in our operations, procurement works in their own silo. Payroll works in their own silo. Yard stock, our storemen are working in their own silo. When we appoint subcontractors, we treat them like a creditor, but yet they're a subcontractor. We need to manage them correctly. Our plant department works in a different silo. And then to create our accounting department, debtors, creditors all work in their own silo. And to create a cost report, we're trying to gather information from all these different departments, creating a spreadsheet, and then trying to make decisions on this information. The information is historic because we have to wait for a financial process to take place before we can allocate it to a cost. And B, how true is this information? So we're saying you break down all the different silos of the construction processes. So everyone's working on one repository of data, allowing us now to immediately get a allowable or budget versus our actual contract cost real-time live, to now have a look at where the challenges are and then to run what-if scenarios to see how we can affect the outcome of the project financially to our benefit, making us more profitable, meaning we are now proactive because our system allows us to be proactive rather than reactive because we react to a situation because any ERP system is always built to report historically. And for that, thank you. I'm now done. If you're going away over December, if you're a Christian, please enjoy your Christmas celebrations. If you're just going away, good luck, enjoy, be safe. If you're traveling, be safe on the roads out there. And I thank you for your time.
I want to thank you for spending some of your valuable time with us. The intent has been to highlight the scope of risk in construction, where the most likely risks can be found and assessed, and provide ideas on actions that can be taken to address those risks. Please do post any questions or feedback. We would be happy to engage you on those.